Today's tutor, Phoebe Hicks, took part in Portrait Artist of the Year back in 2017 when she produced a Portraiture presenter, Sue Perkins, that was full of vitality.
What's great about this is many people have said over the years you're no oil painting, and now I can say, I beg to differ.
Her contemporary twist on a classic style ensured that she stood out.
That's mind-blowing that they chose me. I can't believe it.
At the semi-final, her portrayal of actor Imelda Staunton was full of narrative and captivated her sitter.
I'm going to go with this painting.
As well as creating beautiful portraits, Phoebe is regularly commissioned to portray animals, which makes her the perfect artist to lead us through today's masterclass, Animal Portraiture.
Today, I'm going to show you how I approach pet portraiture. I think pets are so important in our lives, and they deserve a spot on the wall. When you're starting your portrait, you are going to consider where your proportions are. I have made a few marks before getting started here because it can take time. And to save on that time, I've got my little anchor points, and I will now work from this with a little bit more confidence that these marks are in the right place. I'm going to start with a little outline of the head and a few of the darkest patches. And this is going over the marks that I've already made, just to kind of reaffirm those proportions. This particular paper is a soft pastel card, so it has an ability to hold charcoal very well, and you can get very dark marks on it, so you can have a lovely contrast within your work. I'm starting off by using a very soft charcoal. The particular charcoal I use comes in different hardnesses, so you can work from larger, more expressive marks to the finer detail. But using a soft charcoal at the start means you're not bound by those marks too early on. At this stage of the process, I am only focusing on sort of the landmarks. So I'll be focusing on the size of Jago's ear, and then this is one piece of tone. Same for below his nose. And I want to make sure that I'm thinking of these as big block shapes. I'm not thinking of little details of eyes, of whiskers at this stage. It's very important you're looking at it as a sort of abstract, large block shape. So this is a photograph of my friend's dog, Jago. I haven't drawn Jago before, but I thought he'd be a very good example for today because he includes a little bit of chalk with his very fair fur. And I think it sometimes can be easier to draw dogs with much more structure in their face, but it's very easy to forget the structure when a dog is as fluffy as one like Jago. So this stage is quite messy, and the marks I'm making are deliberate, but they're not overthought. For now, I'm just thinking of huge marks, tone, and eventually the light that I will isolate on his face. So At this stage, I'm going to brush the charcoal into the paper. This can take a lot of charcoal off, so marks that look quite dark are going to get a lot lighter, and it can even take some of the charcoal off totally. So I'm going to be brushing in these lighter areas, which I will then mark out in more deliberate shapes using the rubber. But for now, I want to have nearly every bit of the paper brushed. So like I've considered every bit of the drawing, even the areas I haven't put charcoal, I've considered what shape that might be. So a lot of the photograph of Jago has very similar tones, particularly in this lighter shadow area. That will be the most complicated area to work on because it's so subtle. Yet our focus is always going to want to be on his nose because that's where you look first. We're going to look at his nose and his eyes. But I'll continue to consider all the areas throughout. You don't want to put too much focus on one area and start just there and then work your way out, because then if proportions are off, it can start to make the head not feel like a whole head, which is the most important thing. You want everything to feel whole. So I'm beginning to find more detail again, having brushed out the majority of the charcoal. And I'm going to be looking for the big shapes. So this particular mark underneath Jago's eyebrow, I think, is really key. I think his eyebrows are a very distinctive feature of his. And once I've sort of decided that shape, so roughly where it sits, I'll also think of other shapes of that similar tone. And when I say tone, I mean, if you were to make it a black and white photograph, it would be the same shade or darkness of grey. So now I'll focus more in the dark areas of his beard. And this is a very distinctive area because it's of high contrast. So it's working out all the relationships throughout the drawing. And contrast is a really key element, because if you have too high contrast in too many places, your eye is going to be confused. Usually when we look at someone, we're not seeing their whole face in definition. That's what makes this a portrait, not a photograph. So we want to have that area of focus that we choose, we've decided, because we're looking at the eyes and the nose, and we're in control of where the viewer is looking. I feel I've got a good amount of charcoal. I've blended various areas in. We have a few more distinctive marks down here that I probably will eventually blend in. Sometimes, instead of blending in with the brush, this is a small hog bristle brush, I will go on to using a harder charcoal. This can push the softer charcoal around as well as putting on a lighter tone. But at this stage, I'm now going to think a little bit about moulding the light. So I'm going to focus on the top of his nose and around his eyebrows. And I have my trusty, very, very old rubber. It was not this colour to start, but this is the only one I like. I hold it pretty much throughout drawing, so it gets nice and warm. The only thing I have to be careful about is that it can make my fingers sticky, and you need to be careful touching your paper. Now, though, with my rubber, I'm going to just pull out a few marks. So I'm working between his eyebrows on this lovely shape. It's really helpful to give shapes a kind of different, more abstract approach. So between his eyebrows, I'm almost thinking of this as like a flame, the shape of a flame there. And over here, I feel like this little one is a wave. So I'm not thinking about just the shape between his eyebrows. I'm thinking of how is the flame licking between his eyes. And so it makes you stop thinking about just drawing the dog. You're thinking about drawing that specific shape, because all of these specific shapes make Jago look like Jago, and that's what we want to create. I also prefer, earlier on in the drawing, to identify my lightest spot, which I think in this case is usually the nice dollop on the end of the nose of a nice little wet highlight. So this is a chalk pencil. It's not like a pastel chalk in a sense that it's very, very soft and will bleed very, very easily when smudged, will smudge very, very easily. It's a little waxier, and so you can't play around with it as much. You can put it down, brush it in, and use the rubber to work it in. So now I've established where my little highlight's going to be. I will eventually put one in the eye. In plenty of cases, a portrait of a dog, I find the highlight on the end of the nose is the character, where often, particularly with a shaggy dog, you know, eyes can be covered by lovely big hairy eyebrows. So you don't have to get too caught up on wanting that highlight in the eye to bring them to life, make them look wet and wonderful. So I'm going to leave that later. And the more you have down, the more proportions you have established, the easier it is to see all the different relationships and where you want to put those marks. I've made a few marks now that I'm going to push on with, where I like to include some more distinctive, characterful markings. So up here, I've created a few marks, as I usually would with charcoal, but with the chalk on the areas that the light is hitting him from the side. I've taken a little moment to just step back from the portrait. But by stepping back, I've noticed that Jago very much looks like a floating head at this stage. So I will want to put a little definition in of his shoulders. In this photograph, Jago's lying down, and I'm not going to put the lines to define that, but I can see that there's an idea of this might be where his shoulder blade is. And so I might create more of an effect of if he was sitting down rather than lying down. So I'm going to use more of a chisel shape. And it's worth being more confident with these lines, as you don't want to really make them more than once. In this case, Jago's collar is quite well hidden by his fur. In most portraits, it's usually where I would finish, where I'm making all of my more defined drawing, I might give him a bit more of a suggestion of a collar in this. And in the scenario, you might want to sometimes include the tag, write their name or something like that. I'm going to leave it like this for the moment because I'm going to see how the rest of the drawing forms before making that choice. Putting the highlight in the eye, I'm going to pull it off with the rubber, and this gives me a little clean spot to place the chalk. Sometimes, and actually I'm sort of wondering about it now, because there is so much contrast between the dark and the light, just having the paper colour there with no charcoal on is light enough. So I'm actually going to leave that for the moment. It's a very different thing with painting and drawing faces to pets, is that the pet is constantly changing planes when they've got lots of fur like this. But the nose is one area of definition, the tip of the nose, and obviously going up the bridge of the nose. So this is an area where I need to think more of the bone structure underneath there, as there isn't any evidence of his bone structure anywhere else, maybe apart from his brow a little bit. So that's why it can be important to find the definition in the fur as well. I think the main thing I'm trying to capture with the portrait is not only a likeness, but a sense of that character that our pets have. And pet portraiture, such an important aspect of it, is capturing the character. You're not just capturing the dog, the fur, the wet nose. There's life there. And again, pets live with us through so much and are so important. I have a terrier who's seen me through plenty. And I just think that when you see that likeness in a portrait of them, it is so moving and means so much that, yeah, there's a lot of importance in that to me. I think with this, we've got to a stage where I would start to add a few more accents of charcoal just to give it a bit more personality. But I'll move around the drawing and decide what I think needs a little extra flair. It may be a little contrast. It may be a way to describe a little more of the feeling. But I don't want to add so many that they then lose their playfulness, and that then becomes the look of the drawing. I only want to add them so that they are little touches rather than the full description. I think I'm happy with where the drawing's at with Jago, and I'll look at it again after a bit of a rest and see if there's anything else that catches my eye, but usually it's good to just have that break. I hope some things that I've mentioned have been useful and that you can take them home and apply them yourself. But yeah, give it a go and good luck.
If you'd like to find out more about these masterclasses, go onto our website, skyartsartistoftheyear.tv.